Maybe you're becoming more attractive without even realizing it. And we're not just talking about looks. There are changes in the way a man behaves, speaks, and is perceived that can make a huge difference. Today, you're going to discover 3 signs that this might already be happening to you. And the third one usually flies completely under the radar. Topic 1. You stop chasing approval and start moving with quiet confidence. There's a funny turning point in a man's life when he starts realizing he doesn't need to prove himself so hard anymore. He walks into a room without thinking about who he's trying to impress, talks without rehearsing every sentence in his head, and doesn't change his personality just because a pretty woman showed up. That doesn't mean he's lost interest in connecting with people. It just means the need for approval has stopped running the show. And ironically, that's exactly when his presence starts turning heads. A man who's becoming more attractive tends to get more comfortable with silence, with people disagreeing with him, and even with the idea that someone might not like him. He can say no, push back respectfully, and keep living his life without turning every interaction into an ego battle. It's that subtle difference between walking into a date thinking, is she going to like me, versus thinking, let's find out if we actually enjoy each other's company. Sounds like a small shift, but it completely changes the energy he puts out. And it shows up in the little things. He doesn't send 5 texts in a row when someone takes a while to reply. He doesn't feel the need to talk about how much he makes. And he doesn't turn every conversation into a resume pitch. If a woman shows interest, cool, he goes with it. If she doesn't, he keeps living his life like normal. That kind of calm doesn't come from pep talks in the mirror. It comes from having a life that already has direction, purpose, and substance. And once that clicks, a second shift starts showing up in how other people respond to him. Topic 2. People start treating you with more attention, respect, and interest. One of the most interesting signs shows up outside of him. People start responding differently to his presence. Maybe someone holds eye contact a little longer, a conversation flows without him having to force it, or coworkers start asking for his opinion more. That doesn't mean every glance is attraction. That'd be way too easy, and real life doesn't work that way. What matters is noticing a consistent pattern. When a guy gets more secure, more present, more interesting, people tend to pick up on it before he can even put his finger on what changed. This can play out in totally everyday situations. At the gym, for example, he might notice some people start greeting him first. At work, coworkers might listen more closely when he talks. At a bar or restaurant, a casual conversation might come up naturally, without that feeling that he needs to perform. The key thing is he's not necessarily trying harder. If anything, he's doing less, but doing it better. His posture opens up, his voice gets steadier, his movements slow down, and his eyes stop scanning the room for approval every 2 seconds. And there's a reason this hits so hard. People respond not just to what a man says, but to the confidence he shows while saying it. A guy who can listen without cutting people off, hold a conversation without trying to dominate it, and show interest without coming off desperate gives off a kind of stability that's hard to fake. It's like walking into a room and not needing to announce that you've arrived. Your presence just gets felt. But there's an even deeper layer here. Once this shift kicks in, he usually realizes he's no longer trying to look like a different man. And that's exactly where the third sign starts to show up. Topic 3. You become more comfortable being yourself, and that changes everything. The third sign might be the hardest one to catch because it doesn't show up in the mirror. It shows up in the relationship a man has with himself. He starts getting comfortable with his own age, his own story, his quirks, and even the things he can't change anymore. Instead of trying to look younger at any cost, he learns to show up well within the stage of life he's actually in. And that kind of self-acceptance does something interesting. He stops giving off that vibe of trying to convince everyone else he's worth something. You can see it in the small stuff. He picks an outfit because it suits him, not because he's trying to look like he just walked off a magazine cover. He takes care of his body because he wants energy, not to compete with guys 20 years younger. He talks to a woman because he genuinely wants to get to know her, not to prove he's still got it. That difference might sound small, but it completely changes his presence. It's like the difference between someone gripping a door tight to show off how strong they are, and someone who just opens it, because that's simply who they are. And there's a beautiful paradox in all this. The less he tries to look attractive, the more room there is for his real personality to come through. His humor gets more natural, eye contact gets easier, conversations stop feeling like job interviews, and even his little flaws stop feeling like something he has to hide. He doesn't become perfect, he becomes more whole. And once a man reaches that point, he starts to realize that attraction doesn't just come down to his face, his body, or his age. It also comes down to how people feel when they're around him, and that feeling can shift way more than he ever imagined. Conclusion. Maybe the real question right now isn't, am I more attractive? But rather, am I becoming a man who doesn't need to beg to be noticed? Because all three signs we covered point to something way bigger than looks. When he stops chasing approval, starts noticing how people respond to him differently, and gets more comfortable just being himself, his whole presence shifts. And a lot of the time, that's exactly where attraction starts. The moment he stops trying to fake an image and starts building an actual identity. So it's worth paying attention to your own life over the next few days. Does he still feel the need to impress everyone in the room? Does he still treat every rejection as proof that something's wrong with him? Or can he already walk into a conversation, make eye contact, listen, smile, and just be present? Because if the answer is starting to shift, he might be looking at one of the most important signs of all. He's not just looking more attractive. He's becoming more secure, more interesting, and more whole. And here's an uncomfortable question to leave you with. If nobody was watching, would he keep living exactly the same way? If the answer is no, maybe it's time to stop building a version of himself for other people and start building a life he's actually proud of. If this video gave you a different perspective on male attraction, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We're building a community of men who want to understand behavior, confidence, relationships, and what really makes a man more attractive throughout life.